On October 20th, 2003, ESPN2 launched what would later become the most culture-shifting show in the history of sports television, Cold Pizza. ESPN, for the entirety of its existence before Cold Pizza, had had a very simple mission statement. They were the quote-unquote worldwide leader in sports. People could go to them to get highlights of their favorite teams, catch up on the games they missed the night before, and see interviews and sound bites from their favorite players. Their mission was simple, and they were the best at it. But that all changed when Cold Pizza premiered on that infamous fall morning. The star of that show was Skip Bayless, a firebrand sports journalist who had long covered the Dallas Cowboys and had moved his way into spots on notable sports radio and television shows. ESPN saw Bayless as a leverage point into a new type of sports media, one that was so foreign at the time that some people would have dubbed ESPN near suicidal to their own brand for making the attempt. However, Jamie Horowitz, then the head of ESPN, shot a shot anyway. That shot would be later called embrace debate. In a phrase that would become synonymous across sports media, the embrace debate era in sports, beginning with Cold Pizza, turned everything about the industry on its head. No longer would ESPN be known for objective analysis done by milquetoast journalists. Now, ESPN would be defined by subjective hot takes by fiery personalities. Now, instead of discussing the facts of sports, the opinions about sports and all the factors that played into them would take center stage. And to ESPN's credit, they banked their shot home. Bayless, whose grittiness, scrappiness, and to be frank, pettiness made him the perfect fit for this type of work, was elevated into something that journalists never were before across any profession: a celebrity. He soon became wildly popular, partly because no one had ever seen anything like him before, and partly because a good portion of the audience hated him. Skip was both. He was bold, lampoonish, ridiculous, and stubborn. You almost couldn't believe he was a real person. Many people, myself included, still can't believe that fact. After the initial success of Cold Pizza, Horowitz and the rest of the ESPN brass took stock of the success of the show and did what all successful people do: double down. This would prove to be a heavy lift. There would be no way you could find another Skip Bayless, right? There would be no shot of finding someone in the sports journalism field that wanted to risk their reputation, their journalistic ethics, to join an upstart show to do battle with someone like Skip Bayless for 3 hours a day, right? Unbelievably, they were wrong and caught lightning in a bottle twice. The second, and incredulously even more potent bolt of lightning they caught, was Stephen A. Smith. Smith, a brash New York City journalist most famous for breaking the Allen Iverson retirement story while working as a columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer, was the only person ESPN viewed who could hold his own against someone as unpredictable and wild as Skip Bayless. In 2012, they slotted him in as his permanent sparring partner. No one could have predicted what came next. The rebrand of Cold Pizza, First Take, went to the moon. Bayless and Smith made for absolute fireworks every single morning, debating everything from Colin Kaepernick to LeBron Jordan to whether Conor McGregor could knock out Floyd Mayweather Jr. Bayless, an unapologetic homer for his own personal hills to die on, made the perfect foil for Smith, who stood as a slightly more objective voice in the room. The sports media world had never before seen anything like what First Take unleashed on the world. Their ratings were huge, and the fans couldn't get enough. The show soon became so big that they began to tour around the country, making stops at Super Bowls, NBA Finals games, and UFC fights. It became a destination spot to host not only athletes and sports journalists, but also broader celebrities in the field of film, television, and even broader civil rights and political issues. First Take was a cultural phenomenon, and everyone knew it. But like the old saying goes, all things must come to an end. Bayless left ESPN in 2016 when his contract expired, having Max Kellerman fill his old spot. However, Bayless was far from done. Before leaving ESPN, Bayless had done First Take when Smith was on PTO with Hall of Fame tight end and former NFL and CBS analyst Shannon Sharpe. Sharpe, who hadn't been relevant on television since leaving CBS Sports, was just thought to be a temporary fill-in. Yet Jamie Horowitz, now helping to jumpstart Fox Sports and their flagship channel FS1 as a competitor to ESPN, saw an opportunity. CBS Sports, known for their buttoned-up, stuffy commentary and draw-inside-the-lines mentality towards sports journalism, had put Sharpe in a box. He was immensely knowledgeable not only about his chosen sport of football, but of the broader sports landscape in general. In addition, he was, and always has been, a wild personality. But on CBS, he could never show it. He had to tie his tie, shine his shoes, and fit the mold of your bland network personality just like everybody else. But Horowitz, as he did with both Bayless and Smith, saw Sharpe as something else: his next big talent acquisition. Seeing the chemistry that Bayless had with Sharpe and Sharpe's own talent as a debate broadcaster, Horowitz made an offer to both of them to make Fox Sports' own version of First Take. In this version, the handcuffs would be off. They ran the show, and Bayless and Sharpe both agreed. Their new show, Undisputed, launched in the fall of 2016, just as the NFL football season kicked off. And the reception was more than FS1 could have ever imagined. Undisputed went through the roof. For all of the wild events that took place on First Take, they couldn't hold a candle to Undisputed. Driven by Bayless's insecurity and relentless competitiveness and Sharpe's newfound freedom, the show was instantly viewed as the preeminent sports debate show of the era. Their theme song was composed by Lil Wayne, an ironic and weird, to be frank, personal friend of Bayless. Sharpe smoked Black and Milds and drank Hennessy on set. Bayless started to wear chains and Jordans. It was unhinged, and people couldn't get enough of it. The biggest outcome of Undisputed by far was the meteoric rise of Shannon Sharpe. Many, myself included, were caught completely off guard with just how talented he was. Combining his personal experience, vast knowledge, uncapped sense of humor, and cultural clout, the former stuffy CBS football analyst turned into a cultural icon before our very eyes. Unc Shannon was born, with all the spoils that soon followed. Sharpe soon began to sign brand deals, break into new business ventures, and build his personal brand to become one of the biggest not only in sports media, but the world. Soon after Undisputed's glory days began to wane, Shannon Sharpe signed to FS1 pioneer Colin Cowherd's podcast network, The Volume, to launch Club Shay Shay, his own podcast that soon became so big that it was one of the very few that former presidential candidate Kamala Harris agreed to go on. The person who began to notice this the most, unfortunately for all involved, was Skip Bayless. Bayless, whose repressed childhood trauma came out in every single interaction he had, and also reconciling the fact that he was a deeply unhappy person, soon began to be openly hostile, jealous, and resentful of Sharpe's success. He began to attack Sharpe personally on the air, leaving to Sharpe refusing to come in due to believing physical violence would result. The breakup, to all who had open eyes, was inevitable. And in 2023, the bottom finally fell out. After a remarkable 7-year run, Sharpe left Undisputed for Bayless's former spot on ESPN to do battle with Stephen A. Smith on First Take. And Undisputed was never the same. After a horrifying relaunch, the panel of Keyshawn Johnson, Richard Sherman, and Michael Irvin, Bayless left the network a year later to do his own show. And as for Sharpe, the First Take magic that Bayless and Smith had never returned, although both Sharpe and Smith still make for great television. The Embrace Debate era was officially over. And when this initially happened, the sports media landscape just took it at face value. These things happen in the sports media world all the time. Shows launch and flame out all the time. It was just another spin in that cycle, even if this one burned hotter and lasted longer. No one was above the laws of physics that defined this industry, no matter how talented they were. Most everyone, with the rare exception, runs their course. But there was much more than meets the eye to this story. A lot more. In January 2024, Shannon Sharpe hosted comedian Cat Williams on Club Shay Shay. In what would later become one of the most viral podcast interviews of all time, Williams went ballistic, calling out, quote, plants in various industries across the world, and saying that there was a network of sexual blackmail, escapades, and perversion that would soon be exposed. 2024, he claimed, would be the, quote, year of truth. People mainly took it as entertainment, as nothing to be taken seriously. But how wrong we all would prove to be. 9 months later, Sean Diddy Combs was arrested in New York City for running the biggest undercover sex trafficking operation since Jeffrey Epstein. A spirit of fear descended on the Diddyverse, which was massive. Entertainment, movies, music, politics, sports. Celebrities, for the first time, began to live in fear that the nearly impenetrable stranglehold on American culture was in danger of breaking. And it was. People began to speak boldly about the degeneracy of celebrity for the first time in a long time, finally ripping famous people from their pedestals to talk honestly about our supposed upper class. This was, in many ways, refreshing. People, myself certainly included, were wondering just how far it would go. And a year later, on January 5th, 2025, we found out. In one of the most wild examples of both celebrity exposure and the crows coming home to roost in recent memory, Fox Sports 1 was blindsided by a bombshell lawsuit. The center of that lawsuit was around where sports media had been centered around generally for years. Undisputed. Skip Bayless, a married man, by the way, had reportedly propositioned a hairstylist, Nushin Faraji, for sex, offering her a whopping $1.5 million to bed her. Joy Taylor, the host of the show, was her former best friend, and Taylor, who had an ongoing affair with FS1 executive Charlie Dixon to get to the top of the network, when she was told by Faraji about Bayless and reportedly Dixon grabbing her at a party, told her to get over it. Taylor had also tangled sexually with Emmanuel Acho on the show Speak, of which she was now the host, booting sports media legend Marcellus Wiley, one of the founders of the show, in the process. In the words of Jason Whitlock, who was also targeted by Taylor and had worked to help pioneer Fox Sports alongside Colin Cowherd, the behind the scenes of Fox Sports were essentially dubbed the Sexual Olympics. Although no mention of Cowherd and Whitlock were named in the suit, nearly everyone else was put on blast. That is, except for one name, one that Whitlock correctly predicted would be so enmeshed in this degeneracy, so drowned in the deep end of this sexual chaos and politics, that he would need to have his own file built out. Shannon Sharpe. The one name that everyone thought that would be on the list, the only person on Undisputed who wasn't named in the suit, was Shannon Sharpe. Skip Bayless and Joy Taylor were thrown under the bus immediately. So was Sharpe innocent? Not according to Whitlock and other sources. Sharpe, according to the sources, was betting so many of the women behind the scenes at Fox Sports 1 that it would make your head spin. Skip's jealousy had gotten the better of him, which is why he made the ridiculous $1.5 million offer to Faraji to get back at him, as did Taylor's cutthroat ambition, which is why she allowed so many other women to get, pardon my French, quite literally pile-drived in the process. On April 21st, we found out just in deep Shannon Sharpe was. In a lawsuit filed by powerhouse attorney Tony Busby, who had handled suits against both Diddy and Epstein, massive accusations were thrown out against Shannon Sharpe. His client, later revealed as OnlyFans model Gabriela Zuniga, was suing Sharpe for an astonishing $50 million on accusations of assault, sexual battery, sexual battery, and emotional distress. This was far from out of the blue when it came to the unhinged nature of Sharpe's sexual antics. The undercover and underreported reason for him getting forced out at CBS was due to claims of sexual assault. A year before, Sharpe had gone live on Instagram in bed, causing a massive controversy inside his new home at ESPN for an unplanned live stream sex tape. Immediately after the new suit dropped against Sharpe specifically, phone audio was leaked of Sharpe threatening to choke out Zuniga. More was promised, sources said. Like Cat Williams had prophetically stated, it was only a matter of time before it all came out. After the Zuniga suit dropped, more bad news appeared on Sharpe's doorstep. In a story that had been buried by Fox Sports for years, Sharpe had apparently gone off stage at Undisputed and choked out a production assistant in front of everyone in the building of Fox Sports 1. Everyone knew what happened. Everyone saw it happened. But no one did anything. No one cared. Sharpe was too big to cut out of the picture. He wasn't yet expendable. But now he is. Cat Williams proved to be correct. Shannon Sharpe needed to be careful. He wasn't, and now he's paying the price for his lifetime of bad decisions. When she came onto Club Shay Shay, hip-hop artist Monique said that Sharpe needed to stop going after younger women and, quote, get someone who loved him. According to the latest reporting, Sharpe met Zuniga when he was 52 and she was 17. Their place of meeting? A Diddy party. Let me be the first to say this plainly. Shannon Sharpe is done. He's finished. It's over. He will be bankrupted, sent to prison, and left to rot. There is plenty of fire to this smoke. This is just the beginning. More will come out. It always does. Look no further than the lack of people defending him as all the evidence you need. It's a race hoax. They're trying to get Unk. They're jealous. They're hating. You're hearing none of that because all the people that usually say those things know that even this is too big of a fact to cover up, just as it was with Diddy. Shannon Sharpe is officially persona non grata. But let's put Shannon Sharpe to the side for a minute and discuss what's really going on with Shannon Sharpe and with America generally. Why have situations like Sharpe's, Diddy's, Epstein's, and even hoaxes like Brett Kavanaugh's become so popular in the last decade and have been increasing with frequency over time? A part of it, to be sure, to point out the good in all of this, is the severity of the situation. Sexual abuse is a horrific crime and should be punished and paid attention to the highest degree possible. But the bottom goes deeper than that. We like to point at people like Shannon Sharpe and say that we're better than him. We would never choke out a production assistant off camera. We would never have more than 100 BDSM sessions with a woman a third our age. We would never openly talk about the sexcapades of the makeup crew at a major television network in front of coworkers. But we're wrong. America is wrong. Even though Sharpe has committed untold numbers of severe sexual sins and transgressions, this is an appropriate time for all of us to look in the mirror and ask the following question. What in the world is really going on here? The answer, if we're honest, is not one that any of us want to hear. It's uncomfortable. It makes us feel embarrassment and shame. But that's exactly why all of us need to hear it, and why we're going to be discussing it this entire show. The reason why Shannon Sharpe is in his current situation, and the reason why we should all be taking a step back and learning from his situation, is the following. His out-of-control, rapacious, and unrepentant lust. The irony of Shannon Sharpe's situation is that he is a man of remarkable self-discipline. He is known as perhaps the most physically impressive NFL player ever, which continues to this day. His transformation from stuffy CBS commentator to award-winning podcaster and holistic sports broadcaster has been something to behold. His business acumen is unbelievably well-tuned, having seemingly made all the right moves at all the right times. But the one area he couldn't discipline himself in is the exact thing that capsized everything he had worked so hard for: his sexuality. The neat and skinny of the matter is that if you can't impose discipline on your sexuality, you will destroy everything else in your life. Ask Shannon Sharpe how much he cares about the NAACP award he won for Club Shay Shay, or Charlie Dixon about all the hit shows he's made, or Nick Cannon about his music career, or Bill Clinton about his legacy as our 42nd president. They don't care, because they can't care. Their lives are on fire, with only themselves to blame. This is what our hypersexualized culture is doing to so many people today. It's destroying them, particularly young people. Shannon Sharpe may be a very public case, but there are tens of millions of private ones that are eating Americans alive, devouring their souls by taking a great gift from God and plunging it in debauchery and licentiousness. Sexual promiscuity and all the ills that come from it is the root of much of our cultural dysfunction. Whether it's the pornography industry that traffics thousands of women and enslaves the mind of millions of men, the workplace extramarital affair that blows up a marriage, or the unrestrained imagination of the mind that twists your brain into a pretzel, the sin of lust has waged and largely won the war on our minds. Much of the assaults against the base roots of our culture, the church, the family, marriage, children, community, etc., can be rooted in just how far we've drifted from sexual honor and purity. And it should be said up front by me that I'm far from preaching on an ivory tower when I make these claims. I come from, instead, the filthiest and lowliest ditch. I was heavily addicted to pornography for the majority of my life and still very much struggle with lust to this day. Yet I've seen the other side, and as have many people who have been equally or more honest about their struggles. On the other side are all things, ironically, that we find or we look to find from indulging in lustful activity: acknowledgement, affirmation, dignity, freedom, and intimacy. Shannon Sharpe is a cautionary tale for many reasons. He has the characteristics of Icarus, who pridefully flew too close to the sun only to get plunged into the depths. He has the characteristics of Jay Gatsby, a man who accumulated all the worldly possessions you could ask for, but yet ended his life as an empty man, his boats beating against the current, as F. Scott Fitzgerald, the author of Jay Gatsby, artfully put. But more than any other, he has the characteristics of the victim of Screw Tape, the great tale told by C.S. Lewis, who is instructed to destroy a man with his own lust. Lust is indeed a demonic work, as proven by the demon himself. Quote, "Whatever their bodies do affects their soul. It is funny how mortals always picture us as putting things in their minds. In reality, our best work is done by things kept out." End quote. That quote-unquote thing kept out? Sexual purity and its pursuit. The best definition of Satanism I've ever heard is, quote, an obsession with the self. And there is no greater self-obsession, no greater showing of toxic self-love than indulging in rampant sexual degeneracy. If we choose these lower impulses, we choose to be no greater than animals, of whom God specifically told us to dominate and subdue. To effectively do so, we must engage the one vehicle God blessed us with, our conscience, the things that tells us right from wrong. America's lust problem is clearly steering us in the wrong direction. If we want to fix our culture, we must first do the dirty work and fix the filthiest thing about our nature first.